Cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats will aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of the Security Squawk podcast. I am Brian, here with your co-host Randy, who's been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. So we're coming into you a little bit earlier today because we are missing Andre again this week, who is still tied up, and Randy wants to end his day earlier today. So we're going to do the podcast a little bit early. And Randy, unfortunately, we are having technical difficulties with Facebook, so I am going to try to figure that out while you do the intro to the show.
All right. Well, so we do want to thank everybody for being here today. And, we have a saying around here, and that is like, share, and subscribe the show if you can. So the reason we ask for that, because the reason we ask for that is we don't charge for this show. We don't charge for the content that we put out, and we don't have ads on the show. And the best way that we can pay for it is for y'all to like, share, and subscribe. So we do want to ask that you do that so we can get the word out and get more people involved in what we do. So wherever you're watching this, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or whether or wherever, be sure to put a little like on there, leave a comment, subscribe to it, watch it every week. We would really appreciate that. So did you get the issue worked out? Do I need to keep going?
That's good enough for me. I think people get the gist of it. But yeah, you help us grow the show, but you also help other people find the content that we're going to bring to you today, which is education around cybersecurity and what you can start doing to protect your business, to protect yourself. We're going to get on a lot of different topics today. There's a lot of things going on. We have cyber attacks across the U.S. and across the pond. A big one that we're going to just touch on. We normally try to focus on U.S. cyber attacks because there's so many of them, but this one's big enough where we felt like it's good enough or big enough to discuss and bring to everyone's attention. Plus, we're going to dive into a little bit of a discussion today about some of the things that are happening out there currently with cybersecurity and how it relates to laws, regulations, how certain companies might be lobbying or positioning themselves. So we're going to share a couple different things with you and share our perspective with you on what we think the current state is and where we think this is going in the coming months here in 2024. So stay tuned towards the end as we get in that discussion. But Randy, first up on the docket in our little list here is Cleveland. The city of Cleveland in Ohio, they had to shut down their city hall because they needed to investigate a cyber incident affecting some systems. And their statement says, while the city systems remain offline, all daytime 311 calls will be handled by after-hours operators. All internal systems and software platforms will be shut down until further notice. They followed that up saying they are trying to get a better understanding of the situation and that they take cyber threats extremely seriously. And we are working expeditiously to rectify the situation as soon as possible. So it sounds like they're dealing with a ransomware incident, Randy, and they're in the early stages of that. And this is kind of what we're seeing. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely sounds like that. Something obviously that forced them to take their systems offline. They didn't. Yeah. If they just found evidence, if somebody just downloaded malware and they caught it, they're not going to bring all the systems down, right? Even if they caught like a bad actor foothold in there, they're probably not going to bring all the systems down. Typically, they bring the systems down, quote unquote, because the systems are down and they have to take them offline because everything's encrypted and they're getting like the, hey, all your stuff's encrypted screens or, faulty data or whatever it is. So yeah, most likely you're right. There's some kind of ransomware.
Yeah, it's it's an early stage event. They just realized that they had a problem 2 days ago. This is it's Tuesday. They're heading into their second day, so we're going to find out more here. There's very little information, but here we go. Another city, another critical infrastructure, city in the U.S. hit by ransomware hackers, and the city's now reeling with this, and they're going to deal with it. And the residents of that city going to have to start dealing with their services not being available, and people getting frustrated, and all the things that we see that come along with cities and municipalities that get hit with ransomware. So that's all coming for the city of Cleveland. If I covered on my own YouTube channel the city of Wichita. They just went through this whole thing.
Yep.
Have a whole other city here in the Midwest of the United States that's now dealing with a ransomware attack. And it, in a sense, it's frustrating to me, Randy. And I know you pretty well, and I would imagine that you're pretty frustrated over these types of things as well, right?
It is because we've been going on and on about this for years, literally 3 years on this podcast, right? And we just had within the last year the city of Dallas, which is a multi-million, one of the probably top 20 cities in the country with from a population standpoint. So they were hit really bad. Tons of other cities around the country are or have been. And I'm not in a lot of cities, but I talk with some cities, and it is alarming the lack of cybersecurity that I run into. I'll just put it that way. So I share your frustration at the same time, because they're a big fat target just sitting there. And a lot of them aren't doing anything about it, anything to protect themselves. They're doing it after the fact, like the dang city of Dallas. After they got attacked, well, then they brought in the big guns, and they opened a big budget and all that kind of jazz. But they weren't doing a whole lot before that, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is. Now, I'm just going to ask you, because you do have a little bit of experience with this in this world. Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think that they are in this situation where they're not doing anything? Is it lack of awareness, or is it just lack of resources?
It's lack of knowing what to do next.
Okay.
Because the awareness is there.
Okay.
We recently did a cybersecurity risk assessment with a city. We interviewed the city leaders, and every question we asked, they knew. Like, we do this little interview to kind of get the lay of the land before we go in there and start poking around electronically, if you will. And in the interview, every question we asked, they knew what it was, and they also knew they didn't have it. Do you know what I mean? And not only that, they cringed because they knew what it was, and they knew that they didn't have it. So I think with the government, from the federal government, past what was it, $3,000 billion? What does that come out to? $300,000 million budget, and 800 million of that was directed towards cybersecurity. The word is out. The government's talking about it, but it's no different. I mean, a city is no different than a business from that perspective. You've got to have the know-how to implement what you're supposed to do. And so they have mandates. Sometimes they have budgets. Still got to know what to do, to move forward next.
Got it. Okay. So it's, and in a sense, it's lack of talent and resources to guide them on what they should be spending the money on appropriately. So because this is so confusing, a lot of these smaller ones especially are just kind of like a deer caught in headlights. They just don't do anything, right? And it could lead to these cyber attacks, right? Because if you're not doing anything, it could. So we'll keep everybody updated on what happens to Cleveland here, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more. And moving right along, sir, we have this other cyber attack that we want to bring to everyone's attention here in the U.S. with this Nevada automotive group, where Finlay Automotive Group, which operates in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Washington, and Idaho, recently identified a cybersecurity issue affecting certain IT systems. Promptly after becoming aware of the issue, they launched an investigation with the assistance of leading cybersecurity experts and law enforcement. And their investigation is ongoing, and they are working diligently to resolve the matter. Basically, the company is saying all of its locations are open, but the ability to conduct sales and service is restricted. And it advised anyone with a car in service at its dealership to visit or call the service department for assistance.
That one caught my eye.
Yeah. So essentially, their computers are down, right?
Yep.
They can have a conversation with you about buying a car, but you know, might not be able to get the car today, type of deal. So, you know, cyber attack on an automotive place, Randy, not a big deal, right?
Sure. I mean, no. Well, it's actually kind of related to our previous one we talked about more so than we realized. And why I say that is car dealerships are considered by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. They're considered basically like a form of a bank, a form of a money lender, form of a money changer. They handle money, they handle customer information. And so there's rules. Well, it's called a rule. It's called the safeguard rule. It's been pushed down, and they've fallen under all of these, basically the different parts of this rule. And so there's government like telling car dealerships, just like they're telling cities, you need to get secure. They're telling car dealerships, hey, you need to get secure. But at the same time, car dealerships are full of people that they're not sitting around dreaming about technology. Okay. They want to sell cars. They love cars. They want to help people get their cars fixed. And, you know, they're not just running a sprint to try to be on the cutting edge necessarily of technology, especially cybersecurity, especially if it's going to cause them a little more difficulty at work. So, you know, there may be a lack of talent like in the previous, you know, sector of society. There also may be a lack of willingness, which is part of why the government has, you know, basically put some you know, basically said, hey, you need to do these things or else you could have jail time, you know, trial by jury and or fines. So, so yeah, it is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the perspective, and this is why we wanted to talk about it on the show, because if to prospective business owners need to have is that you run the risk of not only dealing with a cyber attack today, but you run the risk of regulators, as Randy mentioned, coming in after the fact and making your life way worse than the cyber attack, right? Because if, you know, like you rightfully pointed out, this organization is under FTC safeguards, right? And the first thing a lot of these companies want to do is run to law enforcement to get help, right? You know, it's kind of like free help a lot of times, while you're working with maybe some cybersecurity experts and things like that. Maybe you have cyber insurance, right? But most cases, when it gets to this level, this big of a business, you're going to get some help from either at least local law enforcement, and you might even get help from the FBI, right? But that's a double-edged sword in these situations a lot of times, because when you have these regulations and they walk in the door and they see you're doing absolutely nothing to protect this data, or you're doing very little, Now you've just opened yourself up to an FTC investigation and, potential fines and penalties and from that. So, it doesn't make me feel good for businesses because we know, Randy, we kind of know the lay of the land out there. We know that like they're playing Russian roulette with these cyber criminals and whether or not their business is going to have to deal with a cyber attack one day. But the cards are stacked against you on the other side if you lose this game, right? I mean, you're going to lose money, you're going to lose customers, and then you're going to have the government coming in basically taking what's left. So in other words, you're going to go out of business. Your government's going to put you out of business because you're not doing cybersecurity correctly. That's really what this is up against. So if you think you can make it through, if you're telling yourself like, even if we get hit, we can make it through, you might want to check where things are at in your industry today, because if you have regulation or if you have things like FTC safeguards, you may not make it through. And I think that's what's at play here, right? So
it is. And, they are, we've had other regulations that were probably ahead of their time that then I'm talking specifically HIPAA regulations, then were either like as you went from administration to administration, typically were enforced, not enforced, not enforced, not organized to be enforced enough to be enforced. These safeguards rule isn't like that. The FTC is very laser focused on this because we're in a different day and age. We're back then it was the the old men with the long beards eating locusts and honey, saying that cyber crime is coming, be ready. Now it's here, and we're having to deal with it now. So the government's a lot more motivated. And so I'm just saying, as a business owner, don't just roll your eyes and say, oh, that's just another thing the government says they're going to do, and they're not going to get around to it.
We're gonna blow through some topics here in the next 10 minutes, and we're gonna touch on this. This is one of the things we're gonna talk about is the things that the government the things that are on the table that our government's planning to do, and the businesses that are shaking in their boots as a result of it, right? And this is going to impact a lot more than just the big guys, right? These regulations will apply to everybody. It just impacts the big guys more because they have the products out there. But it also, in my opinion, will impact the ability for people to start software companies, because it's going to be cost prohibitive to do if you have to actually think about cybersecurity and security when you're building your products. So it's no longer like build it and get it done, get it built and get it out there and get it deployed as fast as possible so we can sell it. That's, that thought process is going to have to change, or you might find yourself not in business very long. So let's jump across the pond and update everybody kind of what's going on over in London, Randy, because this is a fairly large cyber attack on some hospitals in London, and it's affected for 6 hospitals. I forget how many hospitals, but there's a number of hospitals in London that have been shut down basically because of a cyber attack that appears to be on a third party lab that these hospitals use. And somehow this cyber attack, this ransomware event, bled into these hospitals and disrupted their ability to deliver care. It's wild. So, not only have they been dealing with this for a few weeks now, Randy, there's a lot of people saying that they're going to have a hard time restoring from this, and it's going to be a long haul to get back. So number one, just like, how do you feel about the situation? I mean, we just had this happen with Ascension hospitals here in the U.S. where similar things were had But unfortunately, this is in a very large city, one of the largest in the world, not, in spread out hospitals in almost rural areas of the country, which is what you had with Ascension. Yes, it was a lot of hospitals, but if you look at the geographic location, it didn't serve a ton of people. Like this serves a lot of people in a very small area, and I think that's a bigger problem. So thoughts on that, plus also thoughts on what do you think this means for cyber criminals when you're attacking like the UK and the US, and like, do you think that this matters at this point? Like, do you think you're gonna kind of, get the wrath of these two countries? Arguably, if you put them together, probably the biggest superpower in the world, right? And you got just regular dudes sitting in Russia somewhere, just wrecking their countries this way. I mean, thoughts on this?
Well, I would say with the current state of Russian and Western relationship, right, with the current state, and also with what's going on in Ukraine, which basically is a proxy war between Russia and the West. I'm sure that these are Russian hackers, Russian nationality, not necessarily Russian government hackers. It looks like they're mostly after money. But I am almost positive that the government's looking the other way at this point, and is not going to the Russian government. That is just like if we were at war with somebody and, you're out there hacking, the person we're at war with, our government's probably going to look the other way as well. But they have made a mess of this, and they're ultimately going to be after money. So have you heard any chatter, if you will, about, are they going to pay the ransom? Is there a ransom? Or is this just mischief? They got in and they wreaked havoc and they moved on.
Nothing is even remotely close being said about that. I mean, it doesn't sound like they're paying the ransom because they're limping along to get back up. Right. So, so it's just, so I don't know. I mean, this is going on for a long time. I mean, I don't know how much. It's just weird to me, man, that like they keep letting this stuff happen. Like, and there's no, this has been going on for too long, and it's happening to too many organizations in too many countries where, like, it's frustrating for me because we should be able to stomp this out. And we should be able to move quicker on what's happening. And, they disrupt these organizations, and we're just, in the past, Randy, when my concern is we used to see stuff slow down. We're not seeing anything slow down anymore. Right? Like one group gets messed with by law enforcement and you don't see anything slow down. Like literally Lockbit was just disrupted in the last month, and we've seen two major hospital systems in the UK and the US hit in that time frame. Right. So, I mean, and the one on Ascension, you figure it was Lockbit coming back hard, but it wasn't even them. So I don't know where it's going to go, my man, but it's looking bleak out there. And, kind of diving into, I'm going to skip over collection agency one. We're going to jump into, what we've been kind of alluding to here, which is like the problems that we're seeing from, a lot of people blame these cybersecurity problems on companies like Microsoft and Google, because saying that they don't put out secure products. And because of that, we have to deal with this problem. Whether you want to look at it as like we're the guinea pigs for these software programs, from the security standpoint, or you want to look at it as like, hey, we just don't care about cybersecurity. I've heard both arguments. Like, hey, they just use their customers as the guinea pigs for finding their problems. or they just don't care about cybersecurity, and there's no culture of building things in a secure manner. And a lot of lawmakers think that should be the change that happens, that they should, like companies like Microsoft should put out more secure products so we don't have to deal with this, at the business level, right? So, but it goes to the point, right? We got this article, right? Number one, where Microsoft rolls back the dumbest cybersecurity move in a decade, right? So that article just, they just come right out and said, this is the dumbest move Microsoft's made. And I don't know if I agree with that. I can think of some other dumb ones that have been made in the last 10 years. But this one was pretty dumb. So what did Microsoft do, and why did they quickly reverse course on this real quickly?
Well, yeah, so they came out and said, hey, we got a new feature. And what we're going to do is take a screenshot of your computer every few seconds. And then we're going to feed that into local AI on your machine. So when you search for something, the AI will know everything about you. And we're going to turn this on without you having to agree to it. And, we all know that, our AI has never been hacked, and nothing we've ever done's ever been hacked, and nothing's ever been leaked. And, there was never any Exchange server hack that has, ongoing years and years of blah, 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 blah. So they basically said, we're going to do this by we're going to take a screenshot every few minutes. And then they say on the other hand, and don't worry about it, it'll be secure because it's only on your machine. And,
right. So you can argue whether these faux pas by Microsoft are as a result of their culture just not being security aware, and they roll things out like this. And this is kind of like a lot of what our government is trying to figure out. So there was a report released by the Cyber Safety Review Board in March that stated that Microsoft's security culture was inadequate and requires an overhaul. Right. And so that is prompting legislators to address what they see as systemic failures in Microsoft. Now, here's the interesting thing. What I see happening out there, and how I see this playing out, is there's a lot of money going into lobbying, right? And one of the things is they're lobbying to keep things like this buried, but it's getting harder and harder when you have independent review boards doing this stuff and coming out with this information and giving it to legislators. It's getting harder and harder for them not to move on this stuff when the information that they're getting back from these reviews is so damning. What they're saying in these reviews is nothing different than what we say on this podcast every single week, where the state of cybersecurity in all organizations across this country is not good. And then on top of it, the lobbying money is trying to bury this stuff. And once that fails and these laws start to come out, the one thing that I'm seeing now, and the shift that I'm seeing, is, all right, we're going to lose this battle with keeping this stuff buried. So now let's shift it from what the current legislation is saying, which is basically like, you have to do this stuff. You're going to have to do this. And now we're starting to see lobbyists and language change to, well, don't make us do it, subsidize us and help us do it. Right. And it goes beyond lobbying when it comes to IT, because the dirty little secret between our government and IT that I'm just going to end the show with, and I'll leave it to you for your final comment, Randy. But the dirty little secret between our government and IT is our government relies heavily on these organizations like Microsoft, Apple, and Google to help them with technology initiatives that, quite frankly, these companies don't get paid for.
Right.
And that comes into play too, right? Like, hey, if you want our free help, don't make us do this, like subsidize this for us. And that's some of the stuff that we're starting to see. So we'll see. Will your hard-earned tax dollars go to helping these companies shore up their cybersecurity products? And is that a good use of our money when these companies rake in millions or billions in profits every quarter? You decide. Your thoughts, Randy?
No, I have way too many to say in 2 or 3 minutes, but
Right.
you're spot on with that. And it's interesting you brought up lobbying, because I'll just straight up say it. Most of the lawmakers these days are not super diligent about these things. They're just kind of listening to the people that bend their ears. And a lot of times it's lobbyists that do. We have most of their districts, if they're from where a city is, they have crime that's going on the rise, and they're not going after home builders for not making the homes more secure, and they're not going after the car makers for not making the cars more secure. But in this particular instance, because it is very visible, there's other reasons involved, and there's money coming in that's getting thrown to lobbyists and things like that. This is getting their ear right now. We've got to make Microsoft more, accountable, if you will, for the crime on the rise out there. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the side I take, but it's like, why are we picking out this one industry? So anyway, I have heard there's a lot of pressure now from the top at Microsoft, that Microsoft has been very embarrassed over the past few months by these scathing, things that have come out. And so there's a lot of push from the top, saying.
Well, that was kind of my point. The CEO, I just want to point this out. The CEO is saying one thing, and the president of Microsoft is talking a different language. So I think the PR stunt from the CEO is, yes, this is, we are embarrassed. We want to make things better. But if you read between the lines and look at what the president's saying, they're not interested in making things better on their own dime. They want help. And they don't want to be blamed, right? So that's another thing he's saying. So it's interesting. We'll see where this goes. We'll keep everyone updated, because it does matter. The politics of this will impact and shift how cybersecurity plays out in the very near future here. So, all right. Thanks, Randy. I got to run. I'll talk to you next week, and we'll have Andre back. So we look forward to that. So take care, everyone. Thanks for the support. Share the show, and we'll see everyone next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.